And welcome to Flywheel Pod. I'm your host, DeFi Dave. Here with capital K, we bring you everything Frax, DeFi, and everything in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, you've come to the right place. Like I said, this is Flywheel, and we get it spinning. Kit, thank you for joining us for this special episode with Kain Warwick, the founder of Synthetix. We go in deep about everything from the history of Synthetix, what it's like in the field of battle, and what's cooking with Synthetix V3, and maybe something that he may be announcing this week. Maybe announced it already. Who knows? We'll find out. Kit, what do you think of this episode?
Real talk from a real founder, and it was real good.
Yeah, Kain's crazy. He's out of his mind. Yeah, you're gonna have to be a founder, but like I respect it because like we're all a little crazy, especially if we're still here. Like I was thinking when he was like saying like, yeah, he has to be crazy. I was like, wow, we've really started a podcast at the beginning of the bear market. We started the worst time, but also the best time. And so, if you want to hear some war stories, if you want to hear, some tea, this is the episode for you. So let's get right into it. And if you want to keep up with everything Flywheel, make sure you hit that bell button, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, give us a like. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at FlywheelDeFi. Join the conversation on Telegram at FlywheelDeFi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
Follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And you already know what it is. Let's get the flywheel spinning.
परदेसी नू तेनू नित दा रोना पै जाऊगा नाल रंजेठे जोगी दे तेनू जोगण होना पै जाऊगा इश्क दे अलियां जख्मां दे खुद हंस के मुंह सी लांगी जे यार मेरा मैनू जहर दे मैं घट घट करके पी लांगी
Do you hold ETH but don't know what to do with it? Want to earn those juicy liquid staking derivative yields but don't know where to start? Well, FrxETH is there for you. FrxETH is Frax's native LSD solution, allowing you to earn boosted yields in multiple ways on your ETH. If you want to get started, go to app.frax.finance and turn your ETH into FrxETH today. GM everyone, welcome to yet another special edition of Flywheel. I'm your host DeFi Dave here with capital K, and today we have on the chief of the Warwick Crime Syndicate. Actually, I'm just kidding. We have the founder of Synthetix, DeFi OG himself, Kain Warwick on. Kain has been through the trenches and then some. It's another bear market to him. It ain't no thing. So Kain, thanks for coming on. The capo. Yes, the capo. You're right. Yeah, the capo. Or just like the boss. There's quite a few you out in Web3 now. You have your brothers doing Illuvium. Is there like anybody else missing? Immediate family, some distant cousins. Yeah, but let's get right into it because you're no strangers to FUD. And I saw a tweet recently from, I think it was Safety Third, about some guy named Chomsky who early on was fudding debt spirals about Synthetix. And I actually heard from a friend that you actually lent Chomsky S next to short and he never paid you back. So I thought that was a funny story. So from like... Oh my God. So from like that to like, people like fudding like real estate, this and that, like you and Synthetix are no strangers to FUD. So like, how have you dealt with it over the years? And like, how has it battle hardened you?
In the day.
Really?
Which now Green and I are friends. We talk every once in a while, but yeah, it was pretty harsh, and I think there were a number of aspects to that, right? Like why people didn't like Haven. We weren't from like the deep Ethereum community at all, right? Like I'd been running a payment gateway. We'd been supporting crypto exchanges in Australia at that point for like 3 or 4 years, I guess. But I just came from like traditional startup land, and I thought Ethereum was really cool, and I saw that the tech was really powerful. And you know, I for me, decentralization is more about like platform risk, right? Like I'm a deep platform risk person in the sense that, like, you know, if you're building on something that can rug you, it's just really dangerous. And having been in traditional startups for such a long time, going back to like 2000, I've just seen it happen so many times. People are like, I've got the greatest startup, it's working so well, and then like the API is cut off, right? And so for me, it was about like, okay, don't let anyone control your shit, basically, right? Like that was the ethos for me, that I was like, all right, this is the thing, right? And I think in the Ethereum community, there was probably more of like a purist approach of like, yes, like, you know, we want everything to be immutable and what have you. But coming from startup land, I was like, well, yeah, you want it to be immutable. And like, obviously we want to get there, right? Like we want to get to a point where you can't be rugged or whatever, right? But the path to getting there is going to take a while, right? We're not going to get there on day one. And so to be immutable on day one when no one cares, right? It feels strange to me. Like, let's make it, you know, something that can be upgraded and iterated on until we get to a point where it works. And then let's figure out how we make it immutable, right? And people fucking hated that. They were just like, you are a piece of shit. And we're like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And it was like, and I wasn't kind of expecting that. But, you know, I'm here for, you guys know, you follow me on Twitter, right? I'm here for it. So, you know, I drove around and I was like, well, this is what we're doing. This is why. Here's my reason. You know, I wrote a bunch of blog posts about why progressive decentralization made sense, why progressive, you know, governance improvements made sense, why, you know, proxy, like getting into the weeds of like the architectural choices, like why that all made sense. And I just went down and said, like, this is what I believe, right? Like, you don't have to use Synthetix, you don't have to use Haven, but this is what I believe. Yeah. And that kind of was the, I guess, the core of the Synthetix community kind of ethos that grew out of that, of like pragmatism, getting things done. Like, let's approach things in a way that is pragmatic and practical.
Yeah, it's amazing just saying things that you believe can cause so much controversy.
Well, when you believe crazy shit, right? When you believe, yeah. I think we will believe stuff that's against the orthodoxy, right? Like the orthodoxy at the time was like, okay, we're older, we're amazing, we're gonna go in a room for 3 fucking years and build this like sky palace, right? And then no one can see it. And then one day we're gonna open the door, I'm gonna all invite you in and you're going to love it. It's gonna be the most amazing thing you've ever seen. And literally every time they did that, people were like, this is a piece of shit, doesn't work, right? And they were like, ooh, okay, let's try something. And it was like, no, like you can't lock yourself in a room and do things in your own head and expect that you're going to like get it right, because there's a market out there, there are market forces, there's information that you need to be taking in. And if you don't, you know, constantly interface with the real world, you don't get that feedback, right? And like maybe you end up doing that and it's amazing, right? Like Uniswap's one of the few examples I can think of like something that was kind of, you know, this idea and it was taken and implemented. But even Uniswap, we're talking about V4 now, right? Like it was just that the thought was, we'll put the burden on people, we'll make it fully immutable. And I think for Uniswap, this made sense, right? We'll make it fully immutable. When we have improvements, if we have improvements, we'll make people migrate from one to the other. And it'll be, you know, an opt-in process. And I think that cost a lot, right? Like, you know, it probably slowed the Uniswap's rollout down, but it was so much better than everything else that it almost didn't matter. And so I think if you have something that's so good, it makes sense. But for the majority of projects, you need to iterate. You need to interface with the real world.
Yeah, I think with Uniswap, it made sense because, you know, with UniV2 especially, it's just one formula. And they could just like try it out. If it doesn't work, they can go iterate. But I want to hone in with that point with Augur, because that's super interesting, because there's so much promise with Augur. You know, the first ICO, you know, prediction markets, it was mentioned in the Ethereum white paper. Vitalik was, you know, a big, you know, part in like really promoting it and stuff, you know, and this and that. And Sky Palace, you're exactly right. And, you know, every time they felt in like private and every time they came out in public, everyone's like, this sucks, because, you know, it's hard to do things off the bat, just completely decentralized. And like, you know, I get it, but like most of the time it just doesn't work, and it's so much harder, and you have to be like, you definitely have a little bit of courage and like have definitely some bit of armor on you to like take the hits in public and building in public. Like, yeah, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get criticized, but it's just like a matter of like how you deal with it. And like you guys off the bat, like, you know, like when you guys were doing Haven, like hell, it was like almost over. It was like you really like were staring at, you know, the face of it. And then, you know, can you actually talk about how like you went from Haven to Synthetix and like how you like turned it around from like the depths of being it's over to like into DeFi summer and then riding that wave?
Yeah, I think the thing for me, the nail in the coffin for Haven, and there were a lot of issues with Haven, right? But the nail in the coffin for me was USDC. Like that was kind of it. I was like, all right, like we're not going to be able to compete with this in the short term. If we want to be a payment network and we want people to pay, you've got this free token that's backed by fiat that's, you know, semi-regulated. It's just, that's game over. And in my mind, I didn't think it was likely that the US government would allow a semi-regulated stablecoin to exist in the way that USDC has. Now, I mean, there's some people in the government I think would love to shut down USDC and a lot of other things, but you know, regulators at the time were kind of like, this seems fine, which was pretty shocking to me. That was not like on my crypto bingo card was a regulated stablecoin. And so, you know, then TrueUSD, et cetera. I just got to the point where I was like, all right, we can't compete with this. What can we compete with? What can we do that's different that they won't be able to do? And I looked at, you know, the advantage of USDC is it's a bunch of dollars in a bank account somewhere, right? And it's, you know, redeemable, right? There's a direct redemption mechanism. And so we had contemplated having multiple currencies, and it seemed unlikely that anyone in the short term was going to have a bunch of stable coins backed by a bunch of different currency like that, you know, and gold and things like that. So we really leaned into that and like added gold and silver and then Bitcoin, because it really didn't make sense for someone to try and, you know, like BTC eventually came out, right? Wrap Bitcoin came out. But at the time it was nothing. You know, so we saw that as our competitive advantage over something like USDC, I think. And, you know, it feels like that kind of worked out.
Yeah. And then so that was Synthetix V2 that came out. Was like was Haven like Synthetix V1 and then Synthetix V2 was that?
Well, so Synthetix V1 was like Synthetix V1, right? Like that was the thing that came out you know, late 2018, like December 2018.
Okay.
And then we iterated on that a bunch of times, made a bunch of changes, and eventually we got to a point where we were like, this is a new version, right? Like Synthetix V2 basically, right? And then it kind of evolved into like V2X, which was sort of taking a leaf out of the Ethereum playbook, right? And sort of splitting it off and saying, okay, like, you know, we're going to have one thing, which is the in production system that we'll keep iterating on. And then we're going to have V3, which is a totally separate thing. And initially there were like 2 engineers working on V3. Now the core contributors are working on V3. I think there's one sad guy who's like, you know, holding the duct tape. He's holding the wires together to make sure V3 doesn't fall apart. So,
yeah. I have a question actually. At one point, did you and Synthetix become like kind of like just like not really accepted by the Ethereum community, like people coming at you, to like, you know, being a part of this like DeFi circle that everyone, you know, knows about, for like the DeFi OG circle?
Yeah, look, you know, I remember even going to, I guess it was DevCon 4. There was a DeFi summit, right? That happened. We all knew each other, but there was definitely some animosity. And it's like such a classic example of like, you know, like fighting over scraps in the back. Like we were like, everyone had this like scarcity mindset, right? Of like, oh fuck, you know, I need that dollar, right? There's only $2 on the ground, and like everyone's just like fighting for it. And so at that time it felt a lot more adversarial. It was like, you know, very zero sum. And you know, there was still tension between Maker and Synthetix, and you know, a bunch of stuff was going on, I think. But out of that, I think everyone kind of was all in the same room, and it felt like, okay, maybe this is like a thing. But it really wasn't until Synthetix started to do well, I guess, right? Which was on the back of inflation and a bunch of mechanism design changes that we made. Once Synthetix started to do well, this industry is so driven by like number go up that people. Oh, yeah. It was hard. There was still people flooding it, right? They're like, "This is terrible. This shouldn't be happening." Whatever. But like, I think a lot of people were like, "Wait, maybe there's something here, right? The market is sending me a signal. I should probably pay attention." And I think that helped us break in. I think optimism really helped as well. There's no question. Us putting our hand up and saying we will be the guinea pigs for optimism. I think more, because that cost a lot, right? Like there was a lot of investment on both sides, from optimism side, from our side. But we'd had experience with Chainlink in this regard, where a project that's building infrastructure for smart contract systems, but isn't necessarily a DeFi smart contract project itself, right? It's building infrastructure. It's a different mindset you have to have. And so I think optimism had a very different mindset to what they kind of came out of after dealing with us and us being annoying and agitating for all these things and saying, well, we need it. And vice versa, right? Like we understood why optimism made the decisions that they did and what the trade-offs were. And so there was a very symbiotic relationship, but that investment on both sides, I think really helped to cement, at least for us, that we were a credible project and that we were contributing to the ecosystem.
That makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the Ethereum guard like really put themselves behind optimism. How do you think that has played out actually, like over the years? Because I know that optimism's in their development has like a little bit long, like a bit. They were like OVM, then they switched to EVM, then Arbitrum came out first, and now you have all these different rollups. So like how do you think your relationship with optimism has evolved, and like where do you see it going?
I feel like we, and I say this collectively, like we, the Ethereum community, were unprepared for the last bull run. And a lot of bad things happened because of that, right? And that's just, it is what it is, right? It just took us longer to scale than we had hoped. There were a whole bunch of promising avenues that Ethereum had to scale. Most of them didn't work out. And now we have optimistic rollups, and eventually we'll have some zero knowledge rollup or zero knowledge scaling solution that I think will be even better eventually. How long that takes, who knows? But I do think that we're probably like 2 years behind.
Let's get into that more. Like, can you go into more detail, like how you think like the Ethereum community was ill prepared for the bull run, and what came out of that, and what do you think the consequences of that are?
So I distinctly remember the COVID crash, right? The COVID crash for me was the first time, I think, and again, a lot of this stuff I struggled to like keep to keep the order of things in my head. I need like some kind of thing on my wall. Here's how everything. So that was March 2020. Right. And in March 2020, there were, let's call it 50 protocols, right? So all through 2019, a bunch of stuff, there were 50 protocols with like decent TVL that were all connected to one another. And we crossed this threshold of network connectivity of like, the kind of that logarithmic growth of like nodes and transactions connecting to one another, where the network just fell apart. It was the first time where like Gwei spiked like into the triple digits. It was like 300, 400, 500. Even during ICO madness, it never, I don't think, there was anything even close to that. And when you factor in the price of E as well, it was even crazier. And so I think that to me was like, okay, wow, this is the problem, right? Like we built something that is working, is actually using up network resources, and there are insufficient resources for this to be able to function. And I think we all kind of had this sense of like, but that's okay. Like we've hit the edge of it. Cool, right? Like we'd never even hit, nothing getting deployed in 2018. Like post ICO, hangover, like there were like 3 things that were already on mainnet, right? It wasn't, there was some NFTs and it wasn't much, right? There was like Maker. Anyway, so we never even come close to touching the sides of what Ethereum could handle, and now we were. Excuse me. And so I think we were like, okay, now we've got a real practical problem. We need to fix this, and it's important. But it took us longer to fix the problem, and the world caught up with it much faster than we expected, right? So by 2021, the Alt-L1 thesis was so obvious, right? Because, you know, I mean, to me, BSC was like the canary in the coal mine, right? Binance Smart Chain was around, like all through, I can't remember exactly when it launched, but like
September 2021. I remember CC tweeted like "See DeFi" and everyone laughed at him.
Yeah. And so like BSC had been around for, at that point, years, but it was a ghost chain. No one used it, right? I remember they would like spam transactions to make it look like something was actually happening on there, but it was pretty obviously a bid, right? And so all of a sudden people started using it. And that really was like the canary in the coal mine of like, what the fuck is happening here? How are people using BSC? Because projects are being cloned. It was easy to on-ramp and off-ramp from Binance. You know, transactions were effectively free. And, you know, then out of that, you had things that were more credible, right? Like BSC was obviously ridiculous, right? But like, you know, Solana and Near and Avalanche and like all of these things where they just like had some smoke and mirrors as to like how the transactions were cheaper, but people were ready for cheap transactions. That was what, you know, they wanted. Had we had, you know, and look, probably we all should have jumped behind Polygon a little bit faster, I think, right? Had we have really pushed Polygon, but I think we were too smart for our own good in some senses, because we're like, well, this is really a side chain. It's not really secure, guys. Like, versus like, gonna use BSC. Like, what the fuck are we thinking, right? Like, you know, the alternative is so much worse, right? If someone's like, I'll only use a chain if the transaction is less than 5 cents. And we're like, well, you can't use Polygon. Sorry, guys. Like, this is just not acceptable. And they're like, okay, cool. I'm going to use Binance Smart Chain. And you're like, wait, what? Sorry, no. That's what, like, don't do that. And they're like, already gone. They're like in the distance, right? And you're like, whoop, all right, well, we kind of fucked that one. And so I think that whole situation, had we had really like back Polygon and like had, you know, all of the stuff that we, you know, have now, like Arbitrum and Optimism and, you know, even Starkware, I think we would have not seen that. Like, there's always some tendency at bull run for people to find dumb shit to like really pump, right? And so I think that something like Solana or whatever, you know, especially when you've got SBF, who's very opportunistically pumping that, right? You know, I think something like that probably would have happened, but it wouldn't have gotten as out of hand, I think, as it did. If we had been able to keep people in the Ethereum ecosystem, it just would have been safer. But I think this time we're ready. Last time we weren't, this time I think we will be. So
yeah, it sounds like the Ethereum community just got too comfortable. They're just like too much. I mean, as we were talking like in the beginning of the interview, like too much into kind of like the purity mindset of like, oh, decentralization, this and that. But most people are just thinking like, I just want cheap transactions. I distinctly remember back in December 2020, I was with some friends in Brazil, and I met some devs down there, and they were building on BSC. I was like, wait, why are they building on BSC? But like 2 months later, BSC popped off and it made sense. So people are just looking for cheap transactions. And also like all these like chains, like you had like Avalanche Rush, you had like all these like you had opportunities for people to, you know, grow and make money with the chain. And that's what people cared about. And those opportunities were just not on Ethereum, on top of it just being too expensive.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it just a lot of people were priced out. And, you know, there's definitely, you know, there's like idiots like Suzu and stuff who are like, oh, yeah, I love, you know, you people don't care about, you know, you don't care about poor people. Like, oh yeah, sorry, Suzu, you care about poor people. Yeah. Right,
I distinctly remember that. Yeah. I distinctly,
yeah. It was like this, you know, there was a lot of that, right? Of like, you know, the Ethereum community is, you know, like delusional and detached from reality and blah, 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 because, you know, you're all rich and you can afford high gas fees. And so, you know, but like from my perspective, that is not the case. I sat in a Discord every day. You can go back to like 2019 Discord. Every single day, there'll be 50 questions of why is Synthetix so expensive? Why are these transactions so high? It cost me $5 to claim my thing like this week. And like, we were not delusional about the cost of transactions, right? Like, it was just, we didn't get scaling right fast enough. That was it, right? Like, it wasn't for lack of trying. Like, everyone was really bought into, we need cheaper transactions. This is not a viable thing if transactions are costing $20. And we had a lot of user feedback about that being problematic. We were not unaware of that problem.
Yeah, it's so ironic you say Suzu calling the Ethereum community detached from reality, and then seeing what him and Kyle are up to now with whatever they're. Honestly, I've been thinking about this. It just seems like I'm not gonna lie that Suzu and Kyle just took like too many mushrooms and just like completely detached from reality, and they're just in their own world and they think everything's all right. So it's just like we've had like a lot of characters that came through that cycle, like Suzu, we had SBF, and like luckily, like by the grace of God, we were able to weed them out. So like, what are your thoughts on like the villains, quote unquote, from last cycle, and like what people can do to, prevent that from happening again, to prevent them from like seeping in and like gaining influence again?
It's hard because, every cycle, the number of new users who turn up in a day dwarfs all of the old users, right? And so, you've got this like effect where the ability for someone who's been around for a while to get cut through when there's new people popping up that are, saying what people want to hear and saying outrageous things or whatever is really hard. Like, it is genuinely a hard thing to get to like hold people's attention because everyone's running around screaming, right? And so, like, I vividly remember talking to Suzu. It was the first phone call that I had with him, but it had to have been in like 2019, right? And the way that he spoke, like, he obviously understands markets, right? Like, there was no question there, right? But the way that he spoke at the time, based on what people had said to me, like, oh my God, this guy's the smartest guy in the room, like he's, really switched on, whatever. When you have that filter, or that bias that you're starting from, right? You hear some things and you interpret them a certain way where you're like, well, this guy knows what he's talking about, whatever. And he asked me questions, which in hindsight were weird questions that like didn't really make that much sense. But like my take was, I've heard all these people like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. Like, he's so smart. And he really understands like all of these dynamics, whatever, like you totally talk to him. And people I respected were saying this to me, right? People who I thought really understood markets and like, this guy understands markets even better. But there was a sense that, like, again, in hindsight, where I'm like, did he actually get it? Did he get what I was saying to him? Like, I don't know if he did really, or like, I don't know if he had a deep enough understanding of like smart contracts or like mechanism design or whatever. And he just said some stuff in a way that sounded like esoteric and weird. And I was like, oh, okay, this guy, yeah.
What were the questions? Do you remember any of them at all?
I'm gone. I remember we had a very specific conversation, like the part of the conversation, the thread was about this like endogenous collateral idea, right? Like SNX is the primary collateral. And I remember he was skeptical, but everyone was skeptical, right? Like everyone was like, well, this is crazy, right? And I remember explaining the fee mechanism and the way that like SNX, had value, right? Like from this like floor, this price floor that's created from like how many fees are being generated by the thing, right? And, obviously at any time, if people lose confidence in the entire system, then the future revenue will disappear, right? And we were talking about that and we're kind of going deep into that and digging into it. And at one point, I guess he just kind of flipped and he was like, okay, yeah, cool. That sounds good. And so there was one who was like, oh, he gets it. Like this smart guy gets the system. But like, I wonder now, because it was just like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like I'm happy with that explanation, right? Like he was skeptical and then he wasn't skeptical. And I was like, this guy gets it. He's smart, of course. Like he gets the system.
Oh, he gets it now.
Right? Like, I'm like, wait a second, like does he? And I don't know, maybe he did, but I certainly was very strongly biased towards being like, well, yeah, like, look, no one else can figure this out. And this guy has figured it out so quickly, right? And I remember talking to one of the CCs afterwards and being like, yeah, like, I think he kind of gets how the system works. But I go back now and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that was just my own bias.
It's funny because you became known for his esoteric posts on Twitter, especially at the tops of things. And but we weeded them out, and now we're on to bigger and better things. How is this bear market compared to the last bear market?
Well, in the last bear market, everyone was about to die.
I remember. Yeah.
It really was like scrounging around, as crazy as it sounds, right? Because, so much money was raised, but everyone raised money in ETH, and, we raised at an average ETH price of like $950, something, right? By the time you get to the end of 2018 and ETH's up $100, right? If you raised $30 million like we did, you're now down to $3 million. Assuming you didn't convert, right? And we obviously converted quite a bit of our ETH into USD, but the problem was we were so bullish, and this is everyone, right? And like I've said this, like I'll be really transparent here. Like we were so bullish on ETH that we would convert some money, right? Some ETH into USD, whatever the minimal amount that we could justify, right? And then we would spend that. We would be all, well, I'm going to spend this dirty fiat. I don't want to spend my ETH, right? Like, as it's going down, right? And I remember distinctly, we crossed, I was there with one of the CCs, and we were in Korea. So it must have been like July of 2018 or something like that. And we're crossing the street, and I open my phone as we're crossing the street. I don't know why that makes sense, but, try to get to buy a car maybe. And I open my phone right as the light changes, and I look at the price, and ETH crossed, it was either $500 or $300. It was like some threshold where I was like, it can't go below this, right? And I just remember turning to being like, it's over. Like it's over, right? Like
it's over.
It's over, right? It must have been 500 because I think it had kind of run back up, and everyone was like bullish again, and then it just like dropped back. And, and it all in town from July to like December, right? And that whole time we were still bullish ETH, and we didn't want to sell ETH, right? We were just like holding on for dear life. And by the time we got to the end of it, it was 30,000 ETH, right? And we got to the end of the of 2018, and we were like, wow, like we are like down to like 6 months of runway or something. It was crazy. Like we started with like 1 million years of runway, and then we ended the year after a year. Like who, startups are dangerous enough, right? But like who is crazy enough to keep the funding for their startup in a volatile asset of 90% of value?
The most volatile asset.
I'm not. And I think that was the case across the board, right? Like so many projects just were YOLO long ETH and just got heavily wrecked. And by the time 2019 arrived, it was The Walking Dead. We were really, really like on the edge of survival.
Yeah, and this bear market has been not like that. You chill. Not, I would say.
None of the OG DeFi projects are going to die.
Yeah.
Right. In your market, that's just the reality, right? Like, they're well funded enough. It's just not going to happen, right? So you don't have that existential threat hanging over your head.
I guess, like, what new challenges do the DeFi OG projects have in this bear market?
I think that they're kind of the same as they were in the bull market, with a slight twist, right? Which is that most of them are orders of magnitude larger in terms of contributors, community, et cetera. And so getting things done is hard, right? Getting things done, maintaining momentum and progress is hard. It just takes longer to get things done. Back in the day, it was like 30 people voting in a Discord poll to decide what we're going to do that. Like that was it, right? And now it's like this long process, and it has to be because the things are more valuable. And so this is like a bit of ossification. But I think one thing that has really helped in the bear market that's shifted is, while it is still hard, it's actually easier to get attention in a bear market to get people to focus on those problems. And so it takes longer. And when something takes a while, a lot of people just get bored and they kind of switch off, right? Whereas in a bear market, there's more tension. And so you can get people to like focus on a problem all the way through the problem and through the governance process and kind of come out the other side. And so we've seen a lot more, contentious governance decisions that just didn't devolve into like, open warfare, right? Where it's like people can actually have the conversation and work through it and compromise and like get to the end state where, everyone's happy-ish. Whereas in a bull market, I think that's much harder because you just can't maintain tension in the way that you can.
And people are just distracted by price. You get a lot of tourists in the bull market, but now in the bear market, even though the price is down, the quality of participants and contributors, it goes up because they actually want to be there.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that like if you're still here, there's something deeply wrong. Just like there's something like in your brain that's a little bit off, right? And so that I think requires a level of conviction that just shifts the calculus for a project, right? When everyone who's still there is convicted, even if we still have a ton of people. You can go to the Synthetix Discord. There are still guys in there who are only here because they're deeply convicted that SNX has to go to zero. It's bad and wrong and like needs to be like wiped from the face of the earth, right? But they've got convictions. So
there's an army of Chomskys still around just footing you, but keeping you sharp, keeping you out, like, making sure you don't lose your edge.
But they're high conviction. They're not tourists who like, oh, this is dumb, it's going to go to zero, then on to the next thing. Like they're there every day. Like this is, like, here's my thesis of why SNX is worth zero. And I'm going to like push this until, but again, like there's something wrong with them, but they're there and they're pushing for it. So.
But isn't there such a thing as bullish FUDing? Like I see Degen Spartan bullish FUDing Lido on the timeline, like trillions about to be unlocked, trillions about to go away.
I mean, it depends on if it's obvious psyops or not, right? Like, with G, a lot of it is like just psyops, right? He's just, like, he's saying the opposite. He's saying the opposite of what he believes in such an outlandish way. Yeah. That like if you don't get it, it's almost like, well, and I think he would say this, right? Like if you don't get it, it's on you, right? Like if you're selling because of the trillions of ETH that's about to come on, you missed something in the conversation.
Yeah, and the ones in the Discord FUDing, that's a whole different type of FUD. Didn't Degen Spartan come out? I mean, Spartan, he came out of the Synthetix community, right?
Yeah. He was one of the OGs. GmbH, that's his that was his original handle.
Wow. How's it been seeing his evolution from humble Spartan to like big influenza? Look,
it's been, I think he deserves it, right? Like he's a contrarian thinker, and I don't agree with even half of what he says, to be totally honest, right? And I think that I would probably say that like success, and this may not even be the case, right? But success for him has warped his sense of reality a little bit. And I think it does for everyone, right? It just depends in what dimension. But then sometimes I'm like, is it all performance art? I don't even know. Like how much of it is real?
Is it
like,
all psyop?
It's all psyop, right? Like, I do. Look, there's a part of me that I think there's a lot of people that came through Synthetix and did really well and built a platform off of the back of Synthetix. And many of them kind of went on to different things, right? Which is fun. Like, no one owes a project anything. And, I think like Arthur from Defiance Capital was, one of those people that like kind of went a bit too deep down the Alt L1 rabbit hole, right? I think he's come back a little bit and has kind of shifted back to the Ethereum community. But I don't know. There's a sense of like, it is a bit mercenary, right? To like not like, for me, loyalty is a big thing. And so there's people in the community that even if they don't participate in the community anymore, there's still a sense of loyalty towards the Synthetix community. And sometimes I don't know. I'm not saying that G has no loyalty to the Synthetix community, but sometimes it feels like he doesn't, and not even like explicitly, it's just like implicitly there's something missing there, which again is fine, right? Like people can move on to different things, but for me, loyalty is a big deal, and so that probably doesn't sit as well with me as I would.
Like not forgetting where you came from.
A little bit, yeah. Like there's a little bit of that, and like again, he was a smart guy, and I think he was going to find something that was contrarian that was going to do well. And, it didn't have to be Synthetix. Synthetix just happened to be the most contrarian thing that made sense maybe in 2019, right? And he found it. And not just found it, but like, and I think this is where maybe I've got a little, again, like there's a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because he was instrumental in shaping it. It wasn't just like he found a thing and he kind of sat there cheerleading it, right? Like we had deep conversations about like what needed to happen and why, and like the mechanism design, and like talking about, inflation, and like he was a big part of that, right? And so it feels weird to me to have done all of that and have like built this thing and then to just kind of be like, oh man, whatever, like move on, and not have any interest in it anymore, having like shaped it. That just, I don't know, maybe I'm too obsessive. That's my nature. And I think that is the reality. Like I'm very different personality to G, right? Like we're very different people. Yeah.
I mean, like I feel like there's two types of archetypes in the space. There's the builders, there's the missionaries, and then there are the traders or the mercenaries. So you have the builders like you, Vitalik, and then you have the mercenaries like, SBF, G. I mean, they're definitely like not the same person, but like those are two general categories, and it's a spectrum of people. And it's just like, yeah, you can have like, obviously G has some builder traits and he helped you with the mechanism design and this and that, but then he went and moved on to other things such as Lido. But I wouldn't really consider Lido contrarian. Like it is like the top dog LSD at 30%, and and he's behind it. I mean, like it's like a pretty obvious bet. Like LSDs, like I think even back like last summer, LSDs were pretty obvious. If anybody saw like, oh, this is like the beacon, the risk-free yield of Ethereum. But like to go behind like Lido, I feel like Frax, I mean, obviously biased. I feel like Frax is the contrarian bet of 2023. Like everybody's fighting Frax still, like building too much stuff. But yeah, what are your thoughts there between like the builders and the mercenaries? I mean, the builders and the mercenaries.
Yeah. I think that's a very, sort of binary way of looking at it. I think there's
a spectrum. It's definitely a spectrum, but like it had to be binary. I see like the two ways.
Yeah. Because I think there's also VCs out there who some are mercenary, right, and some like there's different like classes, if you will, right? If you want to put it into like RPG terms, right? Like and within those classes, they can be good or bad. You can be like the evil VC, like Multicoin, right? Like Kyle Samadi, right? Like that's like the archetype of the evil VC, right? And yet, like, and I've said this before on Twitter, like to their credit, they kept investing through the bear market. Like the most evil VC in my mind is the VC that checked out in late 2018, like rode up this like wave, and then he was just like, thanks guys, see you later, and walked away. Multicoin still showed up at like ETH conferences and stuff, and they're still investing, they're still deploying capital. Like I might not necessarily like where they deploy the capital all the time, right? But that's it's a free market, right? And so I don't know. I think with G, it's a little bit like there's the mercenary aspect, but there's also like taking contrarianism too far. And I agree with your point about Lido, right? Like it's not that contrary, but there's almost like an ideological contrarianism, right? Where like some of the shit that he says is just like out there, right? So, but at the same time, he's like everyone, he's got bag boulder bias, right? And so, he's got a bag of Lido, and that's the thing that he's going to shill and push or whatever. And, there's a lot of worse things to shill than Lido.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, it's not like he doesn't say, like, he says openly, like, yeah, I'm going to dump on you. So you got to, like, respect him. He's a respectful adversary in the field.
See, that's the thing, right? Where, like, that shift, somewhere it shifted, right? Like, he was, I would argue, in the early days of Synthetix, very positive sum, right? He was a positive sum player, and he was like, we can all do better by understanding things and spreading, the right information and countering misinformation, whatever. And at some point, he shifted from positive sum to zero sum. Now, maybe that zero sum personality was always there, right? But he took on this, like, he almost adopted this like evil villain character. And that's where I'm not sure if it's like performance art, right? Like, it feels like it's kind of performance art because I don't think that's his personality.
Yeah.
The problem is you do something long enough, and like you adopt that personality, right? It starts to kind of seep into your real personality. And so I wonder, I haven't met him in person in a long time. So I don't know, in person, how much it translates from Twitter. I only get the Twitter version these days, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. People evolve.
Yeah. Twitter has a way of amplifying zero-sum characters, as we see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Look at Elon Musk.
Yeah, yeah, that's another arc. Yeah. So you met DJ Spartan in person, like way back in the day?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, what's he like in person? So he's not like it must have been a while ago. Who knows like how he's changed, but like, what was he like in person?
Well, he's 8 feet tall and he carries a battle axe. So,
I knew it. Yeah. Okay. Let's switch gears a bit to what we like are here to get into, and that is Synthetix v3 finally out, been rolling out for a bit. So what is Synthetix v3 and how's it different than other derivatives protocols out there?
I think I'm like categorically the worst spokesperson for Synthetix v3. Fine, really. I'm not the only person talking about B3. Thankfully, there are a lot of more credible people in the community that talk about B3. But I get asked about B3, and my answer is always like, well, we built this thing that was like a cobbled together, like system that's like held together with, duct tape and plywood and stuff. And then it kind of worked. And we're like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, what if we built this thing out of like, carbon fiber and steel or something like that? Like, how much more effective would it be? And so for me, like, that was the initial starting point. I think like the impetus for V3 was we have reached a point where upgrading and making changes and iterating on V2X is so hard because you just don't know what you're going to touch that's going to be a live wire. There's so many, there's more live wires than like anything, right? And so like, you're kind of like creeping slowly through this thing being like, God, don't touch anything. And you touch something, you're electrocuted, you're dead, right? And so the idea was like, okay, it works, we get it, we understand why it works now, but we have all this legacy stuff that we need to get rid of, right? So let's start from scratch. Like even the proxy architecture that we used back in the day is just like insane by today's standards, right? Like the state of the art in like engineering has improved in like Solidity, over the last 5 years, right? And so basically the engineers started from the absolute like lowest level of like proxy contract architecture, rebuilt that, decided something was going to be much more modular, et cetera, and then started, building on it. The cool thing that I think, and this is the interesting part about B3, which I'm not as qualified to speak about, is as they rebuilt it, when you're rebuilding something, you realize that the way that it was built before is maybe even more inefficient than you thought, right? Like, you've got this thing and it's a functional system and you're like, okay, let's just replicate that over here. You start to replicate it. And I think you see things that were not clear from the outside of this other thing, right? Because the way that it was put together was so weird. And, there's like vestigial limbs hanging off so that you're not sure why they're there, but they're like a counterweight to the thing that's over there. And if like you take it off, the whole thing falls apart. And so I think as it was rebuilt, there were a lot of things that became obvious that were possibilities or potential in the protocol that would not just be rebuilding it in a more efficient manner, but would actually allow you to extend the protocol and do more stuff, right? And so I think one of those things is permissionless markets. But permissionless markets to me, I think they're really cool. And I think that there is the potential that permissionless markets will drive some crazy new idea that just isn't possible today, right? And, Ethereum is a permissionless market system, right? Like Ethereum itself, you go and build a market, right? You go and build a smart contract that like replicates some market and people will trade it. The problem is there's this cold start problem, right? That, okay, would the three of us come up with some idea, right? And we go and build this smart contract that like allows people to trade some weird derivative or some instrument, right? No one's going to care. There's no liquidity. Like it's not, we can tweet about it, but like no one's really going to pay that much attention or whatever. With Synthetix, you have a built-in audience and you have built-in liquidity, right? And so I think, I remember back in the day talking to Hart from UMA about this, right? And we had this idea like Synthetix is one end of the spectrum where it's this giant ball of all the things with all the liquidity in one pool, right? And UMA is like tiny slivers of liquidity in each individual, quarterized pool, right? Siloed pool. What if you could have something that was a hybrid? What if you could kind of combine them or like use some liquidity for Synthetix to bootstrap? Because UMA had some cool ideas, but nothing ever really got off the ground, right? Because it just doesn't have that cold start problem and there's not enough liquidity there, even within token incentives and stuff. And this is kind of what permissionless pools are, right? It's a place where someone can go and build a pool and it is going to be inside Synthetix. So there's a built-in audience, there's a built-in, in the same way that you turn up to Uniswap, you make a permissionless pool, it's much easier to get people to buy into that, even if the assets are terrible. The pool architecture is at least safe, right? So like, you're like, well, I know I'm only taking risk in like the dimension of the asset might be nonsense, right? But I'm not taking risk of like going into this pool. The architecture works, right? And this will be the same. It'll be like, well, okay, I want to trade this asset. Someone's created this weird derivative. I might not trust the derivative, but I can trust Synthetix, that the architecture that like I'm going into this thing, I'm not going to get robbed or whatever, right? And so I think that is something that's really cool. But there's even things like in Synthetix, spot markets never really made sense, even though that's what we started with, right? Spot markets are this kind of loss leader free service that you're offering on some level, right? You're giving someone exposure to synthetic Bitcoin on Ethereum and not charging them anything. Like, where is the money coming from? And like, you could say the same thing about Wrap BTC, right? Like, how is it making money, right? Well, I'm sure Wrap BTC has some ways of making money by lending out the Bitcoin or whatever is going on there, right? Thankfully, they didn't blow themselves up. I don't know exactly what is going on there, but good job of not becoming insolvent over the last 2 years. So they're doing something, right? But like, there's a sense of like, what's the kind of revenue model of this, right? And Synthetix, it was like, well, people are going to trade, right? People are going to go from synthetic Bitcoin to synthetic Ether, but it just doesn't pay enough to justify that like free carry you're giving someone to like hold Bitcoin on Ethereum. It's not, doesn't make sense. And so with V3, they've reimagined what spot markets do, and the architecture and the like incentives are just much better. Now, again, I'm not the best person to talk about it because I haven't been involved in the engineering lift of like getting this there. But I definitely know that the existing spot markets are super inefficient and the new ones on V3 are going to be much more efficient. So, there's a lot of opportunity there for things that just can't exist in the current version of Synthetix.
Yeah. I've talked to a few people about Synthetix V3, and from like my understanding of Synthetix V3 is you have a new stablecoin, SNXUSD, which are like the chips, and then you have the markets, which are the games, and you have like the pools, which are the house. And with Synthetix V2, there is only one game. But with Synthetix V3, you can play a bunch of games. There are games that haven't been even invented yet. Is that a good way to simplify it? I think
it is, although there's probably one thing that needs to be clarified. So I had this dumb idea of rebranding stablecoin to SNXUSD, and that got shut down hard.
Oh, it did? Okay, because in the blog post, it was SNXUSD.
It was, yeah. So that, and the the idea was that people don't know that SUSD is associated with Synthetix. I guess that was like kind of the thing. So why not make it more explicit? But what's actually happened is it's going the other way now. So the old SUSD, which is backed by SNX, is going to be now called SNX USD because it's backed. And the new one will be called SUSD. It seems like that's the community consensus. So another one of my dumb ideas that's been shot down by the community, but you know,
community keeping you in check.
Yeah, absolutely. But imagine, okay, like, and this is like such a like silly example, right? Because at the end of the day, SNX USD, SUSD doesn't make sense. Like rebranding, no, like I don't like. On some level, every decision in a startup is like existential, right? Like it might be that calling it SNX USD is like the worst possible thing you could do, and you know, 5 years later, you look back in hindsight and be like, and that's the point where Synthetix died. Right? Like now we don't know that, right? But like on some level in a startup, every decision is high stakes, right? And so you don't want to be like oblivious or you know, blithe about it and be like, oh, whatever, who cares? Name it something. Names don't matter, right? Like I think names do matter. But if I were still the CEO, I mean, I was never the CEO of Synthetix, but if I was still the CEO of Synthetix and I really felt convicted about SNX USD, then that's what it would be called. Right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people in the community who are like, that is a really dumb thing and it wouldn't matter. Because I'd be like, I don't give a fuck. That's what we're doing. I'm in charge and we're calling it SNX. I like that. And it's that.
The capo coming out. The capo coming out.
Right? Exactly. But like, imagine if that were the decision that like blows it up, right? And on some level, it's like, okay, cool. Changing the name, right? Changing the name, it hasn't blown up from being called SUSD, right? Like SUSD is fine. So this is a positive change in the sense that like we're putting something out there now that is different, that could be problematic as opposed to going with status quo, right? Status quo is SUSD. So the community is saying, let's stick with the status quo. We do need two names because there will be two non-fungible stablecoins. So let's name the crappier one SNX USD. Yet, like what were you thinking, right? And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point actually. That probably makes more sense. But again, like if I were the dictator of this thing, I would just say, no, I'm right. And I'd be probably more inclined to not listen to them and be like, no, I'm definitely right. Sorry. So
yeah,
why you've got decentralized governance. It's just a really small example, but like, it's just a, you know, it's just an obvious thing that you need to factor in.
Are there other these examples of decentralized governance in Synthetix at work? For example, I was reading about collateral types. There was like some contention like, oh, should we keep it as just SNX? Or like, oh, like we gotta like be multi-collateral. So like, what are other contentious governance points?
That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Because there are two broad camps, right, in Synthetix about like the collateral approach, right? On some level, the thing that has held Synthetix back since its inception, right, is that SNX is the collateral. Right? Like if, you know, and this is going to be unfair, but I have a certain perspective. And so I'm going to frame it in a way that makes the people who don't agree with me look bad. But that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce concepts. So the mid curve take, right, is like, no, you can't have SNX as the only collateral, right? Like that's the mid IQ take, right? Like, no, it doesn't work. You know, it's too risky. It's not liquid enough, et cetera, right? And then you've got the like, you know, like far left and far right curve takes, which are like SNX collateral good, right? Like that's it. That's all you need to know, right? And the reason that I think people in that mid curve approach really have such a hard time with this is they're like, there are better collaterals out there. Why would you use a worse collateral? Like use the best collateral. Like it's obvious you can't use a worse collateral when there are better collaterals. Use ETH. It's a better collateral. Okay, cool. Who else has used ETH as collateral and run into some issues? Maker, maybe? Like, you know, like, okay, fine, it's a better collateral, but like it's not like it's a silver bullet that fixes all problems. Like if that were the case, then Maker would have $80 billion worth of stablecoin issuance, right? Instead of fucking Tether. So like something is off there, right? In the sense of like, just use ETH and it will fix all your problems. Well, it didn't work for Maker, right? That didn't solve all of Maker's problems. It didn't scale because there are challenges with like inducing enough demand to borrow against ETH, right? And so my argument is that you don't need other collaterals until you do, right? And right now we don't. We do not have sufficient demand, right? We have the ability to add other collaterals, and we could do it fairly quickly, right? So you build in the capacity to do it, right? But you don't do it until you absolutely need to, and you don't do it too early, because the flip side of the argument is that if the reason why Synthetix works is because SNX has value as the primary collateral, and then you switch it out into ETH because ETH is a better collateral, right? Then you get in the situation where people might just be like, oh, what's the point of this, right? Like there's no alignment between all of the different components, right? And so my view is, let's get to a point where we're running out of capacity, which we're not there yet. We're not even close, right? Once we run out of capacity in SNX, then let's have the conversation about ETH collateral, right? And then the flip side is ETH collateral is better collateral, just use that. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've got some empirical evidence that SNX is not as bad a collateral as people like to claim that it is. It's been going along fairly well for like 5 years.
So you're in the pure SNX collateral camp.
I'm in the SNX until you cannot possibly survive for another minute without adding other collateral. That's my view.
Yeah, until it's like, oh, it's completely, off peg and time to add other collateral. Okay.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like alternative derivative models like, GMX with GLP? They had GLP out the gate and they had like, that was like the pool token, quote unquote. And like, do you think it works for them, or like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, empirically it does, right? And this is the thing that I think people get very caught up with in this space, right? They want to look at things theoretically, and it's like, you can look at it as theoretically as you want, but there's empirical evidence there, right? Now, okay, something can work, you don't want to be like 1,000 days in the life of a turkey chart, right? Where something works until it doesn't. You don't want to be in that situation where you're just oblivious to the risks and kind of pick up pennies in front of a steamroller type thing. But like, there is something about that does work. And I think the reason why on some level it works, and I don't know if they were the first ones to do this, but like, as in, I don't know if GMX were the first ones to do this, but, they've kind of taken the Uniswap model, but they've actually turned on the B switch from the beginning, right? So it's, like a balancer type thing, or, whatever, right? So the idea is like LPs are one thing and token holders are another, and you kind of have them as two separate camps, and the token holders get some fees, but the LPs get the majority of the fees. And so you kind of keep this balance, and you kind of keep everyone happy, right? Synthetix does not do that, right? Synthetix says you have LPs and stakers, and they're all one, and they get 100% of the fees, and they take all the risks, right? But I would argue, have kind of come to our senses on that a little bit. And so in V3, I've been advocating for us having like a staking model where you stake SNX and you don't get as many governance rights, you don't get as much fee yield, but there is a place for people who are not comfortable being an LP, but want to support the protocol, right? Like Synthetix right now is like, okay, you want to support the protocol? Go jump into a 6-week boot camp, right? Like strap on your AK-47 and like go, running, like towards the enemy, right? If you're not willing to do that, and you're not willing to like get your head blown off in, furtherance of the community, then we don't want you. And it's like, well, hang on a second. Like there might be room for some people that are like kind of interested, but like not ready yet to like, become cannon fodder, right? Like maybe let's have a little bit of a nuance with that, right? Like, basically like you have an option of like being a diehard SNX holder that's willing to go down with the ship and just be wiped out completely, or get the fuck out. Like that's the current take, right? And I think that having a place where it's like, well, I'm interested in this, but I'm not yet willing to die for it. I just found out about it yesterday. It's like, can we like find it? Right. Can I get a bit more information before I sign up for that? And I think that having a place where you can stake SNX, get some fees, participate a little bit, understand it, and then maybe migrate to, the more, heavy duty version of staking, becoming an LP, splitting that up, I think that makes sense. And so when I look at the GMX model, I see that as a very obvious fit to that model. I think like all pooled derivatives models, there's challenges, right? Like there's adverse selection, there's a whole bunch of things. And, I think they're trying to work through it. Thankfully, we've got 5 years of experience dealing with like adverse selection and toxic flow and all of that stuff. And I think we've solved it, like, for the majority of cases. But it was a very painful way of solving something.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like you guys were the first trying to figure it all out. And so you're just the ones taking the fire. Would you say though that like those early SNX stakers and holders that are just like out in the field, like the Spartans like going into the front lines, they're the ones that like held up the protocol though, even through like the harshest of times. But now I guess like you're at this point where it's like, okay, like how can we expand our base but still like stay true to those early OGs? It's like, okay, like maybe there's like some like Spartan light area we can put them.
And this is the interesting thing, right? And like as you say that, I kind of wonder, to go back to the G conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you have been like literally running around in a forest trying to kill people for like 4 years and you're like, guys, I just want to take a break. And the answer is no, you can't take a break. There's no break. Keep killing people. Like this is a war, right? Like you cannot rest, right? Then I can see how you might be like, well, I'm going to retire. Right? Like I just want to, I think a break, I'm just going to check out completely, and you kind of drift away. Right? And I think that the history of Synthetix, because the requirement of staying engaged is so high, right? That we seem to have more people like and again, maybe I'm wrong about this, but if you look at OG protocols, it feels like we've had more people that kind of came in and then left, and, and like some like heavy people, right? Like Tricio, people who are just like, this is not for me anymore, I'm going to go. And they didn't even stick around at all. They just kind of left. And we gave them a pretty strong incentive to stick around because they had escrowed SNX for like a year. And a lot of them were just like, no, I'm going to sell this off as I go and I'm out. I can't handle this pressure.
They made it 4 years.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. But then, the flip side argument of that is if someone wants to leave, right? Holding them against their will is not going to help, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want a guy in the forest with an AK-47 that really doesn't want to be there. That guy's a liability, right? You want to make sure that
they're taken care of.
Yeah, 100%, exactly. So, so I think that like there are a lot of heavy OGs that were in the Synthetix community that just checked out complete. And maybe that's where, to go back to that conversation, there's a bit of like bitterness, maybe. And like that even includes CCs. Like there's CCs that are just like, they're out. Like I was on a death march for 5 years. Like, let me live my life, right? Like, please,
What do you mean CCs? What do you mean by CCs?
Oh, core contributors.
Core contributors, okay.
Okay. Like the original 10 core contributors, none of them are still in the protocol. Like I'm the only one, that Haven office, right? Like, on the day when we migrated from Haven to Synthetix, there were 10 people in the office, give or take, maybe 9 or 10. There's only one person who's still like regularly engaging. Almost everyone has kind of moved on to other things, right? And even I took breaks, right? There was a point where I was like, listen, guys, putting my gun down. I'm going to take a break. It's been too intense, right?
What was it like taking those breaks? Were you yearning for the field and battle again? Or were you just like chilling? Like, what was it?
I had PTSD, dude. I was like, I couldn't even think about the field of battle. I was like, if anything popped up in my head about it, I would freak out. Like I couldn't even think about it. Like people would be like, hey, we got this problem. Like, can we talk to you about it? And I would like really struggle just to even focus on it. It was really hard. And it took me, I would say, different times where like I dipped in, I stopped being involved in governance, or like I would just do stuff in the background, or like, I kind of relinquished governance control, but I would still be able to counsel where I could like have some say. I tried a bunch of different ways to fit in the community, and as an insane person as I am, most of them didn't really work, right? But it turned out that what I actually needed to do, after a lot, like decades of startup world, I just needed to kind of purge my brain a little bit. And so I took like 6 months and I really just like focused on getting healthy and getting, like finding like a sense of balance in my life. And at some point in the last like 2 or 3 months, it kind of clicked over where that PTSD kind of dropped to like a hum instead of like a roaring thing, you know. And
it
now
was minimized.
now I'm working on a new thing in the Synthetix ecosystem at the moment. That's going to be announced this week, maybe. So
what is this new thing that you speak
You
of?
can't just tease it like that.
yeah, no, that's my only teaser. That's all I got for you.
Oh no! Oh no!
That was the biggest tease ever.
Did he just leave?
Heck.
He's back.
Oh, sorry, guys.
All right, Kain, getting into Synthetix V3 a bit more. I had a question when I was also talking to a friend about V3 and who's actually like jumped into your code and docs and everything. What is the incentive for
that I?
Okay, fair warning. In your own words, what is the incentive for integrators to create markets on Synthetix? Like what, even though like, yeah, there's this like cold, bootstrap, cold start problem, but at the same time, like I have my liquidity, I can get fees from that. Meanwhile, if I'm like, using Synthetix, it's Synthetix that's like taking all the fees. So, and like, yeah, I can put like fees on top, but like, then wouldn't I want to go to a place with lower fees? So I'm wondering like, what is your, pitch to people come build on Synthetix? Do you think there could be something like a rev share in the future with the fees? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, my understanding is that the most recent discussions about like market structure in Synthetix is that the market creator sets the fees.
Okay.
Now, it's possible that governance will have some enforced fee share, right? So, like there could be some minimum amount of the fee revenue that needs to go to SNX stakers, right? And SNX LPs. But ultimately, if there's a market where only SNX, let's assume a situation where only SNX is collateral, right? There's no exogenous collateral. Okay, so you have to convince SNX LPs to put liquidity into your market, right? And that's your job as the market creator, right? So if you were to construct a market where 100% fees goes to Dave coin holders, right? Of
That's
which
right.
there's only one, right?
That's me.
Then you're probably not going to get many liquidity providers putting liquidity into that market, right? Now you could do it, but then you've got the same situations if you just went and built your own market contract on Ethereum and deployed it and said, hey, like, Dave coin derivative land is open, right? Come and trade on it.
DDD. Yeah.
DDD. Dave coin derivative land. I think like the idea is that market creators will need to find a balance. They'll need to attract, like you still need to attract LPs to put collateral into the market. And if the market is good and people want to trade it, that will happen naturally, right? But if you don't have the right fee structure, then it'll be problematic. In a situation where we do have ETH collateral, let's say, right? You may not need to pay as many fees to SNX LPs, right? There might be some like, enforced amount, but like maybe you don't need to pay that much and you're just looking to attract ETH, whatever reason, right? Let's say you're going to build like an ETH-backed stable coin of some kind and use the Synthetix market. And then to step way back, like why does someone use the Synthetix market in V3 versus building their own market? Well, if you build your own market, you could fuck it up. That's the first thing, right? Like, why don't you build your own AMM pool? Like, why do you use the Uniswap? Why do you use the Uniswap V3 or V2 pool, right? Because that is a battle-hardened contract that everyone trusts, right? So you turn up the Uniswap factory contract, it gives you an AMM pool, and everyone trusts it. Now, they might not trust the assets that are in there, but they trust the thing, right? So you may not trust the derivative and how it's calculated, especially if it uses some weird off-chain oracle system, right? Like a user might worry about that, but they will over time trust the Synthetix market, contracts, right? And know that, well, they're not going to get rugged by that. Like, there's $100 billion over here sitting in the BTC and ETH pools. I'm using the same exact contract, so it's safe, right? And so I think that coming to a place where you have everything you need to construct a novel derivative market, and you've got the Lindy of, all of those markets having existed for a long time, having a high TVL, et cetera, it's just going to be easier to attract people. You just need to get the right incentives in place to make sure that it attracts liquidity. That's your only job. Get it, have some people want to trade, and then make sure that the incentives are aligned.
Yeah. So what kind of markets do you want to see on V3? Yeah.
I have no idea, honestly. Like, I really don't. I feel like this is one of those things where it is a new kind of enabling technology for on-chain derivatives. And my thesis for most markets is that people don't want to trade them. I think that for the vast majority, like 95% plus, right? When people come to me and they're like, I'm building a new protocol and it lets people trade, like, I don't know, corn volatility futures on chain. And I'm like, no, like, sorry, like, no one's, like, they don't care, right? And so but the problem is that someone who turns up with a novel derivative market that they think everyone's gonna love, right? Like, this corn farmer is just like convinced that everyone wants to trade corn volatility futures, but the market just hasn't been there for them to do it, right? And like, once it is, then everyone's gonna pile in. Right? The easier you make it to prove that person wrong, right, the better off we will all be. Like, if that person turned up very easily and we can disprove their thesis that people genuinely want to trade this dumb derivative that they've bought up, right, then we can all move on to doing something that people do want to do, right? So long as you have this like idea that people might want to do it, but this inefficiency in the market of being able to test that, I think you have a more inefficient market, and we want more efficiency, right? So let's get through all of the dumb stuff, right? And maybe like 1 in 20 or something like that, or 1 in 100 of these markets will genuinely be something that people really want to trade. But at the moment, the barriers to entry for like creating a new derivative are like 6 months of work, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars of like engineering and audits and everything, marketing, like creating a Discord, like overhead is huge to create like a new set of contracts to go and trade something, right? Synthetix will make that like a 2-week exercise, maybe, right? Synthetix V3 will be like, you can turn up with an idea, plug the components together, and away you go. And you'll know in a month whether or not it was a dumb idea. And most times it will be dumb and no one will trade it and it will die. And then we know, and you can move on to something better and smarter. But so long as you're like, piling away, like putting like, months and months of effort, right? Engineering effort and intellectual effort into building this thing, the market is less efficient and we have less information about the world. And that's a bad situation to be in.
Going full circle back to the beginning of the interview, and also which is relevant in the news right now with the submarine, because there was a prediction market with Polymarket about the submarine, and now you have all this genuine talk about prediction market. It warms my heart because I've like worked on prediction markets in the past. Usually people don't give a fuck about it until the election year, and so it goes like every 4 years. It's like, yeah, prediction markets, it's the time, and then like nope, then it's just a darkness. It's like a bear market for prediction markets. But now, like with both Polymarket getting genuine attraction, whether you ethically agree with the submarine markets or not, and elections coming up, like you could have prediction markets on as Synthetix V3. But I just like wonder, like you always have like the Oracle problem with that. It's like, okay, like you have to like have, it's different than like a chain. So like with like your standard consensus. So what are your thoughts on like prediction markets on Synthetix V3?
So I think the challenge with prediction markets has been that Oracle problem, like historically. And so, whether it was Gnosis, right, or Augur or whatever, like Augur is like multi-round, convoluted.
Oh, it's so complicated.
Theme of like, what the fuck is this even talking about, right? Like that to me is kind of indicative of like coming from this like like Augur was like, we need to build something that can scale to $1 trillion, right? Or something like that. And it was just like such an outlandish level of like security that they wanted built into this product that they didn't even know if anyone would want to use, right? So like my thing is like build a prediction market that like a few people are willing to put $20 in. Like do that thing and get people to put $20 in, and then let's have a conversation, right? Like don't build the thing that's like resistant to nation states out of the gate, but is so convoluted that like no one will ever use it, right? Like it's just such an insane approach, right? So I think that, yes, to your point, like Synthetix V3 will make it easier for people to spin up prediction markets and things like that, right? It will solve that problem. But I also, prediction markets were one of my main Ethereum things when I like first started reading about Ethereum. It was one of the things that I was most excited about, right? And yeah, you're right. Like it's never really come to fruition. And I remember reading a thread. I can't remember who wrote it. He's one of the guys that launched, one of the founders of one of the like big wagering sites, right? But it was like peer-to-peer wagering, like back in the day, I think about like 10 years ago or whatever, right? So they build these like peer-to-peer wagering things, and they're like, no one cares. No one wants to like bet their friend about whether the dog over there is going to like, run to the other end of the yard in 10 seconds. Like, it's just like so fragmented that like, it's just not an interesting thing. People want to bet on like, it's like a winner take all sort of market, right? People want to bet on the Super Bowl. They want to bet on, the NBA final. They want to bet on like, like maybe individual NBA games or like whatever, right? Like they don't want to bet on like, like girls under 13's netball, right? Like, so you can make that a thing and like, it's fine, right? But no one is going to use it. And so the overhead of like creating these things and so like the idea basically, this thread was like, we tried this, we did this. It's not a thing. No one wants to do it. They just want to do the big things, right? And it's the same argument of like, if a market doesn't exist, it probably doesn't exist because people don't want to trade, right? If a derivative doesn't exist. But there are some counterexamples. We just don't know what they are. And so on some level, it's like, okay, let's get through all the things and work out. But if there is, even a list of 10 things that people do want to trade that we just haven't discovered yet that are super valuable to give us information about the world, let's discover those 10 things, right? And so let's do it in a way where it doesn't need this huge edifice to be able to support it. People can spin things up, they can test quickly, find out, oh yeah, okay, no one wants that, cool, let's move on to the next thing, until eventually they find something that they do want and it's cool and it blows up.
Yeah. I remember, speaking of blowing up, no pun intended, I remember reading DARPA had an experiment with, or like the Defense Department had an experiment with a prediction market internally about terrorist attacks, but then they shut it down because it was too accurate.
That sounds about right. I mean, like I think that the prediction market maximalists, right, are like Joey, right? Like, people who are like, this is the way that the world should understand itself or something, right? And like, I'm not quite there, but I do genuinely believe the prediction markets have the ability to like tell us things, right? And that they're a very efficient way of discovering, markets are a very efficient way of discovering truth, right? And so when you put incentives in place, people will, you'll get there eventually. They're not perfect. They don't always get it right, but they're an efficient way of kind of discovering the truth. I think if you believe that, then it's easy to think that it is like this universal thing, right? That like applies in all circumstances, but where it doesn't apply is where no one cares, right? Like working out if the dog will get to the end of the street in 20 seconds or less, right? Like it's not an efficient market. So having the prediction market on that is not going to tell, like, you're better off just observing the thing and figuring it out, right? Like there's not enough interest in it. So like you need that like initial amount of interest to actually find out the truth, right? And so I think that like the prediction market maxis sometimes miss that. They think that like, because it's good at discovering the truth about like large scale things that people really care about, that should filter down into smaller scale things. And I think that as it filters down, the markets get less efficient, and therefore the information discovery gets less efficient and they become less valuable.
If people don't care, then they don't even care for the answer. So
exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Kit, you've been quiet and contemplating. I know you had a few questions on the break, so go ahead.
Yeah, Kain. So I just had a question because, Haven Synthetix is now almost like 5+ year old. And as kind of like the founder from the very beginning and as the main CC that's still around, how was like your evolution of your role has been? And what are you working on nowadays? Like, what is a daily day in the life of Kain El Capo looks like?
Kain El Capo.
Yeah. So I think what has happened is we went from like true startup, right? Like, 3 people in a garage style startup, right? When Haven, I was running another company. I was running a payment company called Blue Shift in 2017, right? That's how I got into crypto, because we were a payment gateway for a lot of the crypto exchanges. And so we sort of took a little corner of the office and started thinking about Haven like a couple days a week, back in, I think, start of 2017. I'd come back from a break. My daughter had been born in December of 2016. I came back from a break and I've been like really kind of deep diving into Ethereum. And I was like, okay, like I think that I want to build something, right? I think it's not just not an asset I want to hold. I want to actually participate. And where are the things that are missing? And so we had like 3 people, then it was 4, then it was 5, but all the way through 2018, 2019, it was kind of 10 people in a room and everyone kind of knew everything. It was very traditional startup. And then obviously COVID happened. It became like this distributed organization. We decentralized governance, all of that stuff. And now Synthetix exists in a state that I think, and a lot of DeFi protocols fit this, which is fairly unique in the world. I don't think that we've had organizations like this really, right? Where there are strong financial, like we've had organizations which are fairly distributed and decentralized, and there's some like ideological motivation for everyone contributing. There's still a strong financial incentive for people to contribute in the same way that you would with a company or a corporation or something like that. And yet it's very distributed and decentralized. And so it's a weird thing, and I don't think we really know what it looks like. And so, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it took me a while to figure out where do I sit in this thing, right? And I think where I've kind of landed is that trying to do things that are on the critical path is not my place anymore. I used to be on every single critical path simultaneously, right? And I think that as like an early stage founder, you kind of have to be. Now I'm on 0 critical paths, right? In fact, I've actually decided to go and pick up and kind of move further outside of what Synthetix proper is doing and figure out a way to contribute and be on a critical path that is not part of the main critical path. It's its own thing, right? I know that's a lot of very wishy-washy language, right? But you'll find out in the next few days what my plan is.
Well,
right?
This comes out on Wednesday, so it may be out by then.
I think it might, yeah. Let's see. We have to get a landing page up with like some details and stuff.
Can you give us a hint? Can you give us like a word? Just like one word. That's a hint.
Oh man, one word. Let's say pragmatic.
Pragmatic.
I've learned to be less dogmatic over time, but I've become a bit more pragmatic about things. And
pragmatic.
I think that taking a pragmatic approach in this cycle is going to be the way to get traction. That's my view. And the good thing is, and this comes back to what's my role, right? I have the luxury of being pragmatic because there is this whole system and infrastructure and ecosystem and governance framework that is much more dogmatic about decentralization, right? So I can actually sidestep and be like, okay, cool, you guys keep doing that thing. That's going really well. I'm going to go and do this pragmatic thing that I think is missing, maybe, that you guys aren't doing. Because it's permissionless, I can do that. I can turn up and be like, I'm going to build something I think we all need, and I'm not even going to ask for permission. I'm just going to do it. If you don't like it, bad luck, right? And I can kind of control that and like have a bit more of a say in how that's operating, I guess, or at least initially how it's structured. And then obviously it needs to be decentralized like everything else, but it gives me a chance to like get that kind of, it's early takeoff phase again.
It's like you're raising a new army, basically.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, a new outfit for the capo.
Yeah, maybe it's more like a little like mercenary team that I'm building, right? That like could go out and take on specific operations that need to be executed. So
specific pragmatic opportunities.
Exactly.
So before we were like talking about breaks and stuff. What are some tips you have to founders and builders for them to avoid burnout and to avoid that PTSD?
I have no idea. I didn't avoid.
I failed at that. Yeah.
Like, I think on some level, if you can delay your capitulation moment as long as possible, right? And this is bad advice. Like from a life perspective, this is not like, I wouldn't say this is a healthy perspective, right? But this is just what I did, and it kind of worked-ish, right? Where I basically just deferred everything, ignored everything in my life except for making sure this thing survived to a point where I was confident that it would, and it had enough momentum, right? And it had reached escape velocity. And then I was like, okay, let me figure my shit out. And I just took a step back and I was like, I need to figure this out, right? And the irony of that is that like, so many people are like, how dare you? Like, how dare you not, keep like grinding yourself into the ground and doing this thing? And it's like, well, you understand that I'm no longer paid, right? I was never paid to do this. I got tokens and I still have those tokens, but like, I'm not an indentured servant here. Like I have, like, I've got incentives to do stuff for sure. And I want to see Synthetix be successful. And, my incentive alignment is stronger now than it's ever been, right? Like Bitcoin going up used to be like almost a separate thing for me, or like ETH going up, right? It was like ETH and Bitcoin could go up and SNX didn't have to go up, and I kind of was okay. But in this last bear market, I basically had to sell all of my assets except for SNX. Like I've got some early stage illiquid stuff, and then it's all SNX because to pay down the debt of Lost Cycle that grew. And, there's a whole bunch of things, right? Like the debt pool wrecked me pretty heavily, especially when we had wrappers. When the ETH price was falling and my debt was going up, that was a bad time, right? And, when you have a lot of debt, a 10% movement is a big deal. And then you look at a bear market and you're like, wow, my debt got inflated by 10%, which didn't seem that bad, at the start of 2021. You cut to the start of 2023 and 10% of the bull market, number is a very big number when you're 80% down, right? And so I was kind of sitting there being like, holy shit, like, wow, I really didn't pay enough attention to that. So I'm in a situation where like ETH going up doesn't move the dial for me. Like SNX are dealing with it, right? And so for me, it was a bit surprising that people kind of had the audacity to question me taking some time off after 5-ish years of, really just single-minded focus on Synthetix, and try to, sort my own shit out so I could come back and be
stronger than,
where I'm, so.
And it's interesting because like when people take a step back, are we supposed to decentralize? And so when like a leader steps back, it's kind of like, they're like, hey, what are you doing? It's just like guys, like we're working towards for me to be irrelevant at some point.
There is an aspect in crypto of like, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to win, right? Like if you listen to, there'll be some side of the argument, right? Like had I maintained, a death grip on this thing the entire time, there would be people that would be still complaining about the fact that it's a dictatorship and, like, I don't care about what anyone thinks. I don't care about governance. I'm only out for myself, et cetera, right? Like that, whereas the flip side is I decentralized it, I hand it over and genuinely let other people run it and create the right incentive structure for that to happen. And people are like, you lazy piece of shit.
Yeah. People just want to be mad at something. They just want to be mad at something.
Oh, wow, it's cool. Thanks very much. Okay.
Yeah. I had one more question. Kit, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm good.
No? I want to shift gears a bit towards, because you are actually a early Frax investor. You're one of the seeds, I believe. And back in 2020, and back, that it feels like stablecoins that have gone through like multiple cycles. And if like DeFi is like over here, stablecoins is just like the dramaticism of that. It's just a whole different dimension. So like, what are your thoughts of, since it's the Frax podcast. What are your thoughts on Frax's progress since its inception? How do you think has it done? Like, what would you recommend for it? And do you see any synergies between Frax and Synthetix in the future?
So I think for me, Frax was kind of two things, right? Like as an investor, I'm very focused on the founder dynamics, right? Like, does this person seem credible? Does this person, seem bought in? Like, are they going to, are they a tourist, to use, a phrase that you used earlier, or are they like legit, like, are they building an army basically, right? Like, are they a one-man army that's going to, build an army around them and be able to kind of fight this out? Because it's like crypto's hectic, right? It's really hard. And startups are hard enough, but crypto makes it even harder. And so I guess my sense from Sam was like, absolutely. Like, this is a guy that's going to go down with the ship, right? Like, and he'll blow up the ship if he has to, right? And I don't know what circumstances would require that, but like, it seemed like he's the type of guy that would do that. That's what was required, right? So for me, that's always pretty bullish, right? And there's a lot of people in the space, I think, who kind of fit that bill where I'm like, this person's a little crazy, all right, in a good way. And so there was that. And then I think the other thing was, like, I've always had a view that we need to keep kind of iterating on stablecoin designs, right? That, it would be weird if, like, BitShares was the kind of final design of stablecoin. He was reasons, right? But like, there were people who were like, no, don't try this. We've got this. Like, BitShares has solved the problem. USDT has solved the problem. Like, we don't need any other stablecoins, right? And so for me, looking at a design that was like kind of a weird mechanism design that I didn't know if it was a good idea or a bad idea, but it was novel, I was like, okay, like, I'm willing to run with this experiment. Like, let's see, right? And I think the final thing for me was, it was a bit of a personal hedge, right? Because being backed by USDC, at least partially backed by USDC, right? I'm not a huge fan of USDC, right? Like, pragmatically, I think it's a good thing, right? And you have to, and this coming to my other thing that I'm working on, like, it's going to use USDC. I'll say that, right?
When Frax, I'm just kidding.
So, but it's going to use USDC on mainnet. I'll be even more, direct, right? Because that's and you know what? It's even going to use USDT, right? And as the person who made the t-shirt Tether is a crypto abomination, right? And you could find my article. It is, but also if you're pragmatic and you're like, the market's wrong. I'm not wrong. The market's wrong. Like, at a certain point, you have to look in the mirror and be like, no, actually, you're people, like, even if people are using USDT for the wrong reasons with bad incentives or whatever, like, at some point you just need to accept that people are doing what they're going to do, and you can't change the market, right? You know what? Standing on the sidelines, shouting slogans at people, right, is not going to change the game. It's just not. You need to get in the game, and you need to, like, slowly shift their mindset, right? And so for me, it was like, okay, we did this, we were pragmatic for 2018 Ethereum smart contract suite. We were very pragmatic, proxy contracts, like weird governance structures, all of that stuff, right? Like, we took a pragmatic approach, but we were dogmatic in settlements. We were dogmatic in, like, no USDC, no USDT, no centralized stablecoins, no this, like, we're going to be purely decentralized. And that's worked out really well for us to a large extent. Like, even no DAI. Like, we're so dogmatic that we're like, DAI is a piece of shit. We won't have that touching up protocol ever, right? Like, that's pretty dogmatic, right? Because DAI is just a wrapper for USDC. And so it's like, okay, cool. Well, how's that working out for you? Okay, but not as well as it could, right? So let's actually be pragmatic, and let's go and find a way to use these things that people want to use without it necessarily being a part of the protocol. And that is where I sort of see my role move forward. It's like, how do I bridge that gap? How do I build something that is like a pragmatic approach that lets people do the things they want to do, where they want to do them, but still lets them use the protocol, and not say, you could only be involved in Synthetix if you're willing to strap on an AK-47 today. No thought. Like, you don't get 2 weeks to think about it. There's no opt out. You sign a contract in blood, and then we're sending you out on the field. Like, that's what's happened, right?
It's cryptographically signed on chain, the contract.
I think it's like sign your life away and go. And they're like, no, like, what is going on here? That's insane, right? The fact that we found anyone to do that is a testament to how insane people are crypto. The fact that in 2018, 2019, people were willing to sign away their life and run at something, we throw a gun at them and it's just like, go guys. And they're like, oh, I got nothing left to lose. I'm out, right? And so, like the fact that those people even existed, like G and, Nocturnal and some of those guys is kind of crazy. But we need to now like meet people where they live. And we need to say, okay, you're not ready to go to Arbitrum or Optimism or Polygon or whatever. You still got money on Binance. Let's come and meet you where you live and let's make it easy for you to use these things.
Leading the pragmatic push.
Yeah.
Kain Warwick.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great note to end at. And at this point, we go through our lightning round now. So it's like a series of just like fun, offhanded questions, real quick.
Get to know the man behind the legend.
Come back and close the Frax loop, right?
Yeah.
That is the thing, right? I think Frax was like this kind of pragmatic approach. And for me, right? It was a bit of a hedge because it was like, well, if I'm being so dogmatic over here that like DAI is this untouchable thing, right? Well, then being an investor in something that is taking a different pragmatic approach is a good hedge for me. Like I really saw that. I was like, this is a person who seems credible. It's a novel design and it's a good hedge for my own insanity over here, right? And I'm very happy with it. I think it's worked out as a good hedge. Has been a good hedge.
How is it? What's it been like seeing like Frax and Sam's and how they acted in the space over the past 2 years? Or 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think, the thing that you need to do as a founder, as much as anything, is be a spokesperson for what you're doing, right? And I think that Sam does a good job of that. Like sometimes you need to be incendiary, sometimes you need to be balanced, sometimes you need to be unhinged, right? Like you need to have that. You need to strike that balance, and I think he does a good job. I think he does a good job of being an advocate for Frax, and a lot of crazy shit has happened. Like any project that's lasted this long, like crazy shit, and you got to be able to let. And so, from that perspective, I think as a seed investor, I'm pretty happy. I think that my faith that I had in his ability to kind of do what was needed has been pretty well borne.
Yeah. And do you see any synergies with Frax and Synthetix in the future?
Well, I think that Frax does some weird stuff, right? And so, when you are doing weird experimental stuff and there's a new place to do experiments, there's obvious synergies. Now, whether that makes sense, because Frax has a level of scale, that like Frax 2 years ago, whatever, 3 years ago, if Synthetix V3 existed, could have been an experiment that was done on Synthetix V3 potentially, right? It was done the hard way, and I think that that's cool. And I think what will likely happen in some of these markets is people will do something, and it'll be a market that kind of works, and then they'll be like, oh wow, this has scale, and they'll spit it out, right? It'll be something that's spun out into its own protocol, because I think that there is, controlling the full stack is still valuable, right? Like I do worry about platform risk. So anyway, I think overall it's pretty cool, and I think it's done really well, and I'm pretty happy.
Same here. We try to be advocates as well. No. I honestly started calling myself a core advocate because I was like, what's my exact position at Frax? I'm more like advocating than contributing. So I guess we all are in a sense. But anyways, let's move on to the lightning round. This is the fun part.
Yes.
There we go.
It's just for us to kind of get to know the man behind the legend, the man behind the founder. And the first question we always like to start with is, what was your virgin crypto experience? And sexist doesn't count.
So the first thing that I tried to do in crypto was to run CG Miner on my home theater PC back in like 2012. And I was, to the best of my knowledge, unsuccessful. I couldn't get it run. I had a really shitty home theater PC. It was like an embedded board, and the drivers just wouldn't take it, and so I never got it working. And so I think I abandoned it. So that was it. It was a failure of running a Bitcoin. mining
Maybe
rig.
you have some like Bitcoin hidden on that home theater that you don't know.
Well, I actually went back and I found that I'm like a bit of a hoarder when it comes to old hard drives, and I went back and found that hard drive like 4 years ago, and there's an installation of CG Miner, and like you can see that it never actually ran. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I mean, stolen mining in 2012, I don't know how effective that would have been on a shitty machine like that. I think if I'd been in a mining pool, I don't even know if there were mining pools back then. There probably were, but yeah, I don't think it wouldn't have been much Bitcoin. I mean, the block reward is 50 BTC. If I'd gotten lucky, it'd be nice.
Yeah. Synthetix was my first DeFi protocol that I used. I guess other than Uniswap. Yeah, but it was Synthetix because it was Synthetix back in like DeFi summer 2020. I was like playing around and found you guys. I'm like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah. And the second question is, what is your favorite off-chain touch grass activity? What are some interests and hobbies of yours?
So I've been running a lot lately. And so probably running and I guess playing chess. I don't know if that counts as touch grass, but I play over the board chess.
What's some advice you would give to your younger self?
No idea. No advice.
No advice. Just
no
swing it. No.
Strap on that AK-47 and head in some direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then if you weren't in crypto and weren't in startups, what would your professional career be?
Well, I wanted to be a tennis player, but I wasn't good enough. So I think if I'd had like a little more sanity, I could have maybe made it as a tennis player. I was a pretty decent tennis player, but I didn't have the brain for it, unfortunately. It's too unstable.
Too unstable. Last question. Who would you recommend as our next guest?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question. I need to go on Twitter. This is a terrible lightning round. I need to go on Twitter and see who's doing weird stuff. Maybe, I guess you guys should probably have Hayden on for like a V4 conversation, unless you've already done that.
Oh no, not yet. I mean,
that's a bit of a boring answer. I'll see if I can think of someone a bit more out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's always new characters popping up, and I think we do a pretty good job highlighting them.
Yeah.
But on that note, Kain, thanks so much for coming on. Really excited to see Synthetix V3 fully rolled out, and whatever you're cooking up, that's pragmatic in the near future.
Thanks, guys.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the post game. Thank you for sticking around. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with Capital K, coming off the interview with Kain Warwick, founder and now contributor to Synthetix. This was a long one, another deep cut for you, very special. And I think this is like the opposite of last week, because last week Infinity Post was super technical, getting really deep into numbers and the intricacies and mechanisms. And Kit, that's your specialty. But with this one, it was more about, the story, the arcs, the characters, the feelings. Kit, initial thoughts. What did you think of this interview? What do you think, Kain?
I thought it was just the right type of interview because, as Kain alluded to kind of midway through the interview, is that like he's been pretty much hands off on the critical path across all of the key products, and he's really looking at new frontiers, kind of pushing Synthetix over there. So I felt like your angle of getting to know, who he is, what's his character like, and what his focus is, his stories, and how he thinks about Synthetix from the beginning as Haven all the way to where it is now. I think, that was a really, really good cut for people to get to know some behind the scenes stuff, I would say.
And I think the number one theme of this interview was pragmatism, and the blind spots actually that, Ethereum and dogmatic builders may have when constructing anything from protocols to like, the chain itself, and the consequences of having those blinders. So for example, like one of my favorite parts of this interview was when he was like, yeah, I think, Ethereum kind of fucked up this bull cycle. Like, it got, in my own words, I said it got too comfortable. And then you had all these alt ones come and like take, mind share and market share.
Yeah. I think one thing that was very intellectually honest was that he said we should have backed Polygon harder. I thought that was very intellectually honest to say.
Yeah.
That's totally true. Like out of all the other, alt L1's alternatives, Polygon was like honestly the closest we can get to calling it an L2, right?
Yeah, it was the most aligned
before the L2
yeah.
can come. Exactly, it was the
most aligned with their
um,
values. But you then had some people that were like too picky, like, oh, it's like they're dishonest, like this and that. And what actually happened in the end is now they have like all these different like L2 experiments and whatnot, and have actually been contributing to the Ethereum ecosystem. So that it we really like went down memory lane here, like when he was talking about like 2018, 2019, it was like, yeah, it was dark. Like literally, like we only had 6 months of runway left. We went from $30 million to millionaires to 6 months, and I think like one thing I took, like if you're like in the space, especially if you're a founder, if you've been around for 5 years, like you have to be crazy. You have to be out of your mind. You have to be irrational to like have the conviction and the gall and the fortitude to survive like what it takes to make it in the space.
Yeah. And I think your one question regarding is when facing the quote, is it over moment, like kind of what do you do? And I think Kain had a pretty insightful way of looking at it, where it's like at that point in time, and you've really decided to kind of embark on this path, your conviction just simply needs to outweigh pretty much everything else. And you kind of got to be a little bit crazy. And that got me to thinking how that is different from this bear market. Because last bear market was, is it over? But this one, I feel like that question was never even surfaced.
No.
Like nothing was existential. Like there was no existential like threat to this bear. So I thought that was a clear evolution. But what's funny is we're more bullish now than we were in 2018, 2017. So I think that was a very clear evolution in the market participants. Because there were moments when I thought it was like,
me too.
Is it over?
Me
like
too.
hey, there are definitely moments back then, but none for this one.
Now there are actual users, there's competing protocols. It's like really exciting stuff happening on chain. Before there was nothing on chain. There's probably like a few things, like you said, NFTs, like Synthetix. Like it's pretty cool what Synthetix built with like what they had with V2, what they like stitched up together. And then with V3, basically they had to build from the ground up and realize like, oh shit, like we don't want to step on a live wire and the whole thing blows up.
Yeah. And dude, you really got to commend like founders like Kain and all the OG DeFi founders who kind of stuck it through with the same project. Because, you obviously work at a VC fund, and I previously was with one. And we know founders who just raised, failed, and then quit the project and pivot to like a completely new thing and raise money again and kind of like redo that.
Or they make too much money too fast, as not just with founders, but like, people in the community, like I think one shining moment of the interview was like, like when you get success or like, get like a certain level of, made it, it kind of warps your sense of reality. And I think that's true for everyone. And that's what he said that. And like, you saw that with like, maybe you saw that with certain community members, early ones, and maybe it happened with DJ Spartan. Cause like when he said DJ Spartan was positive sum, I'm like, no way. I'm like, did he, or when? Like when, since when? But maybe he was, and maybe, maybe it was interesting when he said like, he was like playing a character, but like, you got to wonder, did the character become like him? Did he like become his character? Did it like take over like the persona?
Right,
or him? Who knows? So what are your biggest takeaways from this interview?
I think when kind of designing a community, you don't just have hey, on the one hand, you got to strap on a helmet and here's your AK and charge that way and die. On the other hand, it's like, fuck off. I feel like there needs to be a kind of a spectrum, like how with FrxETH, you could choose to VE yourself for 1 week all the way to 4 years. Like that kind of level of flexibility in contribution and commitment, I think is the proper evolution of a DeFi, or rather any DAO.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about now. One thing that I wasn't expecting his answer, because when I was going to this interview, I was, with the multi-collateral question, he was like, oh, we should just have SNX collateral. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I was thinking you want like, in my head, it's like, oh, don't you want like multi-collateral? Don't you want like other? So you can like expand the system. But his argument was like, as Synthetix, like SNX can still handle it. And I get where he's coming from, because like the more like SNX is the only collateral, the more value accrues to it. And it kind of just makes it stronger over time. And then like once you get to the point where you need other collateral, then you like get it to until you like can't do it anymore. I don't like, well, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
I mean, let me pull in an example. It may not be the best example, but similarly to what Terra did, right? Terra did use its own collateral up until a moment where it's like, hey, maybe I should add in some other collateral. And one would say the moment they decided to add in other collateral was the chink in the armor. And that was when everything started kind of crashing down hard, because that was another vector of attack per se that people had on the system. So I don't know. I that's how I feel about the add the collateral later when we need it, rather than have it right now in the beginning.
Do you think adding it would be a risk?
I think adding it. I think the way you add it, and because he built in modularity, as he said, into the system. I thought that was the most cleverest thing to do, is that you could add the collateral later if you choose to. But now I think, how do you implement that? Do you roll it out slowly? Do you have a cap on it? Do you, like now all of these like how questions kind of prop up around the best practices? Who sets those best practices? Is it the Spartan Council, or is it another council? So it adds all these how layers to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, interesting to see. And, this was a fun interview. It was great to hear his perspective and thoughts, and like him going in on things and how he felt about things, and how the evolution of its like community and Ethereum in general came along. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. This is like, I think, one of our biggest guests we've had on since the inception. Yeah.
An OG.
So, an OG.
Sure.
Like, Kain, thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to, keep up with all the guests we have on in the future, make sure you hit that bell button, give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube, leave us a comment, let us know if you think, love us or hate us. We want to know. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Flywheel DeFi. Join our Telegram group at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And we will see you next week. Peace. Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.